Good afternoon, and welcome back to a joint meeting of the Burbank City Council with the Parking Authority and Police Commission on Tuesday, October 14th, 2025. I'd like to introduce our police commissioners and welcome them to this meeting. Chair Romick Hakopian, Vice Chair Michael Ellman, and commission members Mr. Mike Chapman, Mr. James Coombs, and Mr. Narbe Hartunian, and Mr. Paul McKenna. And Miss Ann Wenzel. I got a lot of Anns in my script. Thank you all for being here tonight. I look forward to hearing from you later after our study session and grateful to have another joint meeting with all of you. Before we begin, I'd like to note our public comment procedures. Speaking time limits will be either 3 minutes, 2 minutes, or 1 minute, and will be determined at the beginning of the public comment period based on the number of cards we receive. No additional comment cards will be taken once the comment period begins. So if you're in the audience, you can turn those in to our wonderful city clerk now. Today's study session item is a review of the report from the Office of Independent Review, OIR, group monitoring the Burbank Police Department. I now welcome our new chief, Burbank Police Chief Rafael Quintero, to commence the presentation. Welcome, Chief.
I love the pronunciation. Thank you very much. There we go. Caller, are you there? Okay, there we go. Mayor, council member, city staff, Rafael Quintero, your chief of police. So it is my pleasure and honor to introduce the Office of Independent Review Group, who we have had a relationship with for the past 13 years and serves as an outside independent monitor for the city of Burbank. Mr. Janako, Mr. Connolly, and Mrs. Magula have an important and critical role within the OIR, specifically in constructively providing oversight, transparency, and also identifying ways that our organization can be better. So annually, they review and prepare a report that specifically addresses a couple of areas. So alleged misconduct, all use of force cases, and also all vehicle pursuits. From my perspective, I can tell you now, having been here 6 months, their report is something that I have come to appreciate. Not only the ones that I reviewed in the past, but also this one specifically. The review, the report, and also the recommendations are completely aligned with industry best practices that I take seriously and definitely look at implementing. So the other thing I think that is also important is the transparency and the accountability piece. And not necessarily kind of just because it's highlighted within the report as far as the things that we're doing or specifically memorialized through policy, but I think it's our actions as an organization and what we are doing aligned with the report to show the community that we are being transparent and accountable. And through the report, we've been able to not only identify kind of things that we're doing well and aligned with best practices, like I said before, but also areas for improvement. And, whether either via policy or otherwise, I was happy to review that report and notice that we are where we need to be. So I don't look at this report as, I look at this report as a tool, but also what I like to call an accountability mirror, and being critical of ourselves, looking inward as individuals, as an organization, in making sure that we're moving our department forward. So with that, I will invite Mr. Janako up.
Thank you, Chief. Welcome, Mr. Janako.
Got to make sure I back up here. It's great to see you all again. Madam Mayor, Council, Commission, and city staff, really appreciate the opportunity to be presenting again on our audit for the past year. My name is Michael Janako, and I'm part of the auditing team. As the chief indicated in his opening remarks, I'm here with Steve Connolly and Teresa Magula, who did much of the heavy lifting on this report, and I'll be turning over some of the discussion to them in a minute. I just thought I would start with some opening remarks to sort of set the framework for the high-level theme coming out of this report. Recently, an official in another city was talking about our auditing work and the reappearance of us to come back for another audit, and she indicated that in some ways having an auditor come on board is like going to the dentist. Am I on, or do I need to? Am I good? Okay. Do you want this? Do you want to be in charge? You want to put up? Put it up. There we go. There we go.
Thank you so much.
Are you good?
I feel much better.
Are you feeling good? You were nervous. Without a prop, you were a
Just
little.
trying to make sure you had your.
All good. Thank you. In any event, this official said, having an auditor come, it's like going to the dentist, right? So are you going to come here with a prognosis for 2 root canals and a crown, or exactly what's going on here? It is kind of like that. I get it from the point of those being audited. But one of the things that you don't have to do is you don't have to come to us. At least we are willing to come to you. We do house calls. But it is important, I think, before we get into the details of this report, to again go back and talk about context and sort of the path that has been taken by the city and where we are on that path, especially with regard to your police department. When we first came on the scene, and that was about 14, 15 years ago, things were not great with regard to the way in which your police department was being seen by people within the organization, people outside the organization and the community, the U.S. and California Departments of Justice, FBI. There was just a lot going on as a result of some unfortunate episodes that had befallen members of the police department. And the city appropriately did a whole lot of things that were, quite frankly, very significant, important, and quite drastic in some ways. The old regime was moved out. New folks who had no connection to Burbank were brought in and have essentially led this organization for about a decade or more. We have a new leadership coming on board, and appreciated the opening remarks given here. But that road was a long road, and it was extremely bumpy at first. As auditors, when we started to engage with the city, from Jumpstart with the new leadership, we got, and throughout the whole time we've been engaged with the city, complete, total cooperation, unfettered access, but there were a lot of issues that needed to be dealt with. I would not say that we were certainly not the sole transformation agent with regard to a lot that needed to be done. That was in large part done by Chief LaChasse and then his team that he brought in. But we did have a lot to look at and then a lot to report about. There was, in the auditing world, we say that when we first got started, there was a lot of low-hanging fruit. Not only, just as an example, not only were internal investigations consistent with industry standards. Unfortunately, there was a time, and we reported this in our early years, when they weren't even getting done on time. And under state law, if you're not getting something done on time, you can't, even on founded cases, you can't discipline or offer any remedial action to an officer as a result of the 1-year statute of limitations. Those were the kinds of low-hanging fruits that we saw and that were challenging and bedeviling the department during that transition phase. Good to say that over the years things improved and continue to improve. I have not been shy in saying over the years that every year I have seen marked improvement with regard to the way in which the department performs its important responsibilities. Those responsibilities for us, the responsibilities that are the ones that we are most interested in and I think critical to the success of any police agency, is the accountability piece, the transparency piece. When an allegation or a complaint of misconduct comes in, how well that allegation is going to be handled, how thorough and effective and impartial the investigation is going to be, and whether the result with regard to the disposition or outcome is based on evidence or is based on whether you happen to like or not like the particular officer who is the subject. Obviously, those were critical to us, and we have seen marked improvement with regard to that. The other area in which we get involved, and again, it's a critical piece of accountability, has to do with the use of force. In order for officers to do their work effectively, we give them awesome authority. We give them the power to arrest, the power to detain, and in appropriate circumstances, we expect them, if necessary, to use force to protect themselves, third parties, and the community writ large. And along with that awesome authority comes, in our view, an awesome responsibility to ensure when force is used that that force is looked at through a microscope. That is, was it even necessary to use force in this case? And the California legislature supported us on this and now requires that when force is used, that there also be a look at that question, whether de-escalation strategies may have been available and were feasible, and if they weren't, an explanation for why, whether it was too dynamic a situation or what have you. The second thing that we expect BPD to do, and they have done this, is take a very careful look at, could things have been done differently? Could there have been ways to improve the response? Was force absolutely necessary in this case? And if it was the level of force or the force option appropriate under the situation? And then finally, all of the other aspects. If there was injury, were the paramedics called? Was the subject sent to the hospital, transported to the hospital timely? All those questions need to be answered. And for the city of Burbank over the past 3 or 4 years, and I've repeated myself, but I think it's important to continue to sound this note, we find that review process that Burbank takes with regard to when force is used to be, if not the best, one of the best mechanisms in the state of California. And of the 20-some clients that we have, we put it at the top. We put it at the top so much that when other agencies who are not as far along on force review as Burbank has been, we actually ask them to come take a look at Burbank's system. And this past, was it last year? The year before last year? Last year, we invited 2 agencies that are really sort of neophyte agencies with regard to use of force from Northern California. They think they know everything up in Northern California. Well, they don't. And they came down here and spent a day or half a day with the architects of the Burbank use of force review process so they could learn from them. And that's how highly we think of that process. With regard to this report, and I'm going to turn it over in a minute to my colleagues to dig a little deeper into some of the particulars of this report, we again find that we are working to try and come up with suggestions to improve the way the department does its work, but again, it's at the margins. It's not the low-hanging fruit that I had been talking about that happened a decade or more ago. It's a different situation. We have a different scenario. Sometimes I refer to it as we're not at Oversight 101 or Accountability 101, we're at a graduate level. To torture my initial hypothetical, when the independent police auditor is coming in, we're not doing root canals and crowns. We're doing some cleaning. Yeah, we're doing some cleaning because Auditors, that's what auditors do, and it's always important, in my view, to have an outside look at what's going on with any agency that has the awesome authorities, responsibilities, power that we provide our police officers. And I think it's critical to do that. Again, Burbank is relatively alone with regard to having a vibrant oversight program. But I think as a result of some of the successes that you all have enjoyed or your agency has enjoyed, others are starting to think about maybe we need to do this. And I'm proud to say that Pasadena got the memo. And now Pasadena is now just beginning through the direction of my colleague Teresa to start an oversight program like yours. Why did it take so long? Why did it take them 13 years? I have no idea, but they're there, and we look forward to working with them. I think my opening remarks are there. Obviously, we'll be available for any questions at the end, and really appreciate the opportunity to present again today. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Steve to get into the nuts and bolts of this case. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nacco. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening. Thank you for having us back. I am going to go hard slides here. I don't know about this guy. All right, so Mike talked about a lot of this. We have been affiliated with the city of Burbank since 2011. And in terms of the scope of our work, it has evolved a little bit since our original contract with the city. And the city has actually added some things over time in an effort to respond along the way to different issues that were of concern, and just kind of keeping up with best practices and maybe new ways to add an element of oversight to the department's operations. In terms of how it works, our audit is for incidents and investigations that were completed in the year 2024. So when the year's over, we give the department a month or two to kind of wrap things up for the prior calendar year, and then we reach out to the department. We don't review everything, but we do have certain criteria that are kind of mandatory that we're going to see all of those cases. Any critical incident involving like an in-custody death or an officer-involved shooting, there were none in 2024. And then a sampling of use of force cases and misconduct cases, and then all of the vehicle pursuits that the department has every year. So the point of that sampling is not necessarily to weigh in. The cases are already done. We're not going to come in and change the outcomes, but it really is, to go back to what the chief was saying, it's about transparency of the department's process. It's about accountability to the public because we're making a random selection of cases, and if the department weren't taking its misconduct investigation seriously, if they weren't reaching outcomes that made sense and were supported by the evidence, then that is obviously something that we would be addressing in our report. So the whole idea is for us to be able to share with the public the effectiveness or potential limitations of different department processes. And each year we make some recommendations. As Mike was saying earlier, they have become more and more specialized as time goes by, just because the department's processes are quite sophisticated now. But we're always looking for ways to work with them at the edges and strengthen them to an even greater extent. In terms of our findings from this year, we're happy to say that our fundamental impression of the way the department handles its internal review processes is extremely positive. The processes themselves are very well structured, thorough, multi-level. Every incident that we look at has been given scrutiny by department supervision at multiple rank levels, and they clearly do have an appropriate commitment to not only accountability, but for officers in terms of whether they violated policy or not, but also particularly with regard to the force review process. Are there opportunities for adjusting people's performance, learning from individual things that happen and affecting decision-making or communication skills or supervision or what have you. So the thoroughness and completeness of the department's processes remains certainly something to be commended. We had 16 recommendations that emerged from our report this year. We'll talk about a few of those along the way, and as Mike was saying, we're certainly happy to answer any specific questions that you have. And one thing that began a few years ago that we think is a very good process is that the department responds to them, they digest them, and makes specific responses. So they take some accountability for the things that we have suggested. It's not just the report, they make it through this day and it ends up on a shelf and they don't have to think about it. They have made some formal commitments in their recommendations that we'll follow up on. I am going to just focus on one aspect of the project from this year, and that was the misconduct cases. We ended up looking at a total of 21, and again, that's a sampling of, I think there were approximately 45 or 50 completed cases by the department in the calendar year. There were 4 sustained findings. The rest of them were either unfounded or exonerated or not sustained. So a lot of the public complaints were carefully investigated, and the officer's conduct was found to be in keeping with department expectations. One of the content areas that we have had a mandatory see-all part of our scope of work is anything alleging bias, even if it's just a portion of a complaint that has other concerns related to it. If the public complainant makes any allegation that he or she has been treated in a biased or discriminatory fashion, that's automatically going to come to us for a review. There were only 2 such cases this year. That's the fewest number of cases involving an allegation of bias since in recent memory, certainly that I can recall. And just as a frame of reference, the previous year there were 5 separate cases. The department's review of these has become extremely well established over time. They have a format and a structure and an approach that I think is very, very good and also constantly evolving. They do as good a job as any agency that we work with of taking advantage of the body-worn camera recordings and incorporating that into their investigative process. They really do detailed analysis of the BWC. They'll put picture still shots from the videos into the actual text of the investigation file as an aid for reviewing. And they really are using that technology, I think, in a very sophisticated way. And that has had a couple of significant effects on the process. One, cases are completed probably much more efficiently and quickly than they ever have been. And number 2, the results are a lot more conclusive than they used to be because the evidence ends up being pretty definitive. As Mike said, we always are going to have little things along the way, and hopefully not big things along the way, but yeah, anytime and we always say, if somebody came in to look at our operations the way we look at the department's operations, they'd probably find ways that we could enhance our efficiency or improve things. Especially I'm not sure about that. But having said that, the concerns that we identified with regard to misconduct investigations this year really were related to interactions with the complainants as much as anything else. One of the things that we're always very, very focused on are the complainants being made to feel as if the department is looking objectively, taking their allegations seriously. And we have long complimented the department on their back-end notification letters, which are extremely detailed. They explain to the complainants exactly what the department did and why it reached the outcome it reached in much more detail than any other agency that we work with and in much more detail than is required by law. The front end of that process has to do with intake and listening to the complaints, interviewing the complainants. We saw an instance where a couple of the interviews that we looked at, I think the interviewer, the supervisor who was handling it was well-intentioned, but it ended up being some explanation and then debate as opposed to just hearing what the person was concerned about and saying, okay, I hear you, I understand you, I'm going to investigate it. So we encourage the department, it's a very common dynamic, and again, I think it's well-intentioned, but we encourage the department to work with supervisors who are handling intake to make sure that it's just basically objective listening and doesn't turn into cross-examination or debate. And then in a couple of the cases that we looked at, not a huge deal, but some courtesy and professionalism issues that we felt like there was some room for improvement. One of the sustained cases did in fact involve a finding on the department's part that the officer was discourteous in his interactions with a person that had been stopped for a traffic violation. And in general, maybe even more concerning than that, there were a couple places where we were watching the body-worn camera video and thinking this really isn't ideal, and the department kind of pushed past it. We didn't have the sense that it was looked at. Didn't rise to the level of a violation, but maybe still something that warranted a supervisor reaching out to the officer and suggesting other approaches. So again, as we have said in the past, the misconduct process, the investigation of public complaints and the department's own initiating of investigations, that's obviously a crucial element of department well-being and public confidence. And the bumper sticker version is that the department continues to do a very good job in addressing these issues. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Teresa.
Thank you. Welcome, Ms. Magula.
Hello, Mayor and council members and commission and city staff. I'll move on to the next element of, the next element of our regular review process. We review use of force, and just as Steve mentioned with the misconduct investigations, we take a sample of those. So the department had 74 reportable uses of force, and we took a sample of 22 of those. Overall, we are seeing, as Mike mentioned, this is the gold standard review process. So from a process standpoint, the department is really doing a holistic review. They're looking at things from start to finish, not just the moment of force, but certainly looking at the tactics leading up to that force, anything that happened after the force. Was medical care received if that was appropriate? Did the supervisor respond to the scene, and so on? In the past, we've made recommendations that could augment that process, and the department has taken those on. So they are, as Mike mentioned at the top, looking at de-escalation explicitly as a factor that they're evaluating. They're looking at that supervisor on-scene response. Is the supervisor directing the use of force, or is he or she engaged in the use of force, and was that appropriate? So those are items that have been added in the past year that we felt were just enhancing the process that was already a gold standard, as we've said before. One of the factors that we continue to harp on, and we talk about this kind of in every jurisdiction where we work, is the idea of defensive tactics. And so one of the majority of the uses of force in our sample of 22, and in fact across the 74 uses, involve what we refer to as the lower level use of force types. These are our control holds, our takedowns, things that the officer or officers might engage kind of their own body in effectuating the arrest or gaining compliance from a subject. And we've noted that this is a perishable skill, right? And so just as any other skill, we would like to see it trained with frequency so that when this is needed by officers in the field, they are confident and they are ready to engage in that way. Defensive tactics is trained typically in a 2-hour block every 2 years. Some departments have more training than that, but regularly it is something that is not taught as a MAT class, as a repeated skill throughout the year or the 2-year cycle. So we really impress upon not just Burbank, but other departments to have that ongoing refresher, micro-learning, if you would, some defensive tactics in the briefing room prior to going out. However, a department can incorporate more of that hands-on training so that it's readily available to officers when they need to use it. They're not feeling hesitant. They're not feeling concerned about their confidence in going hands-on with a subject. I see we got snacks. Really, I'm all for that. I'm so all for that. The next piece that we look at with regularity is the vehicle pursuits. I'll start just by giving you the counts. Burbank in the last year had 5 formal pursuits. 2 of those through the department's review process were found to be out of policy. Those were for communication issues and some officer safety tactical style issues. But overall, this concept of vehicle pursuit is one that nationwide agencies are struggling with. It is a challenging component. Burbank is not stranger to the challenges of this. So ranging all the way back to, I think it was 2015 or 16, the city identified that there was just a lot of vehicle pursuits in this city. And there was some concern about the risk and the liability that that may pose both to public safety as well as sort of to the city's budget and the payouts that were occurring as a result of those. And the pendulum swung almost to the opposite end. And rather than having a largely permissive policy that allowed the agency to pursue almost all offenses, it became very, very restrictive. And so we were seeing a drastic drop in the count of vehicle pursuits. That had some unintended consequences, right? And so what we started to see is that there was a shift in the policy drafting somewhere to the middle. And there was the restrictions on formal pursuits, but then some perhaps gray areas or classifications that did not rise to the level of pursuit, but allowed some officer discretion. And at the time, we felt perhaps those were appropriate to allow for that real-time engagement of an officer who's seeing something before him or her, deciding whether or not this should be a pursuit, but certainly created a bit of ambiguity as far as the reduced liability and the challenges that the department might face from a review process. And we actually saw that come to fruition in this cycle. So we noted some activities that were classified under these new criteria, but that looked an awful lot like vehicle pursuits. And they were not subject to the same rigor and review as these 5 formal vehicle pursuits that the department actually put through their paces. And we find ourselves sort of at a net new kind of starting point, for better or worse, where there's an opportunity now, yet again, to take a look at what is the city and the department's pursuit philosophy. How much risk are we willing to take? What is the amount of public safety versus the law enforcement kind of reward of apprehending people through vehicle pursuits? And it's really an opportunity here to dive into what that looks like for the city. A risk versus reward, payout liability, versus the actual need to apprehend people who are fleeing or who are seeking to do damage or violence to the city. It's something we've discussed with Chief and his command staff. They're certainly looking to retailor the vehicle pursuit policy and understand how it might best suit the needs of the city. And we encourage in our report that city stakeholders play a role in that as well, to help frame out what that's going to look like for you uniquely here in Burbank. The other unintended consequence of having a very restrictive pursuit policy with not a lot of formal pursuits is you have a whole cadre of officers, particularly the newer ones, who have never been in a vehicle pursuit in real life. And so when they're faced with that in real life before them, the challenge is extremely daunting, as it would be for anyone, certainly. And we're looking, again, as with defensive tactics, how can the department incorporate that kind of regular routine training, scenario-based tabletop exercises. If you were faced with this, what would you do? Is it a go? Is it a no-go? Have supervisors engaged in that. And again, those exercises that can help to support the officers in the field. And then every year we get a special topic. We, in the past, you may recall, have presented on the department's response to persons experiencing mental health crisis. We have looked at the body-worn camera program. We looked at the Racial Identity Profiling Act, or RIPA. And this year, we chose to look at the Field Training Officer program. We found overall that the Field Training Officer program here in Burbank exceeds the state's standards and the state's requirements. They are blending kind of two types of models that are typically used for officer training. They're looking both at the qualitative side, so how do we actually count and, quantitative side, how do we actually count and measure an officer's performance, 1 through 5, today was a good day, today not so great, and these more kind of qualitative measures, critical thinking, adult learning, problem solving, and they've blended those two models in a way that's very effective for this city's program. The program, and it's very detailed in our report, but the highest level is that you have new officers, new trainees coming into the department from various places, different academies, some are lateral transfers. They're coming in, they get kind of a baseline expectation setting of Burbank. Here's our department, our municipal code, our policies. And then they move into this training cycle that's 3 phases over the course of 6 months. They are paired with a field training officer. They are receiving daily observation reports, continual feedback, peer support and training, and so it's a very comprehensive, well-rounded program. What we were able to do as part of this review, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again, is one of my favorite things is when we're looking, kind of just taking a peek behind the curtain of daily police operations. So what we were able to do is get calls for service that an FTO and a trainee responded to together. And in our line of work, we are looking at kind of these extreme, exceptional cases, uses of force, vehicle pursuits, potential misconduct, and this is just your routine policing. And so we were really gratified to have that opportunity to see what the FTO and the trainees are doing. I'll highlight one particular set of calls for service that stuck out to me. It's the same FTO and trainee. On the first call for service, they were responding to a call for service related to sexual battery. And the FTO and his trainee both responded with such compassion, with such care to this survivor, and gave her space and time, told her to take breaks, very sensitive topic, very sensitive questions. The trainee made it a real point to make sure that she was safe and felt comfortable. So a lot of compassion there. And it was directly juxtaposed with the next call for service, which was for a suspicious vehicle. And you saw right away the shift in the way that this FTO and his trainee responded. Command presence, use of exceptional de-escalation, including speaking to the driver of the suspicious vehicle in their native language. It's fortunate that they were able to communicate in that way, and that served as a de-escalation tactic. And really no nonsense, right? So certainly the same level of professionalism that we would expect, but an entirely different context of who showed up to the call. And that to me was just a striking peek behind the curtain of what those high standards that we hold our law enforcement to, right? We're asking them to respond to very different things from 1 minute to the next, and they are transitioning appropriately in the way that they should. We wouldn't be doing our job if we aren't providing some recommendations, and so we looked really to add perhaps a component of community service, of engagement with community into the FTO program. They're certainly tasked with a lot already, so we don't want to overburden, but it could be an opportunity to allow these trainees to really immerse themselves in some community component of the city. And we also, of course, are very aware of wellness and resilience. In particular, at this point in time, a trainee is experiencing an enormous amount of stress coming into a net new environment, new expectations, but also the FTO. And to provide the programs and the peer support and the wellness and mental health support that these particular teams might need. The department and the chief are very committed to that. And so I'm sure we'll see a lot of that coming out in the coming year. And per usual, we put up our website and our email and our contact information. Any member of community or otherwise who's seeking to reach out to us can do so at our email or at our voicemail number there. All our past reports are available on our website, and we thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We appreciate it. It's always great to hear that our department is doing great.
Absolutely.
All right. Madam City Clerk, at this time it is a time for public comment. Do we have any public comment?
We do not.
Great. That being the case, I now declare the public comment period closed. And at this time, I would like to invite Chair Romick Hakopian to present a report on behalf of the Police Commission regarding its oversight responsibilities and to offer any questions or comments to the Office of Independent Review Group's report. Before we do that, though, and you know this is coming, I am a new mom, so I will be passing it on to the Vice Mayor. Thank you all.
Welcome, Mr. Hakobian.
Thank
Please
you, Vice Mayor.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mayor Perez. I know she's leaving. Vice Mayor Takahashi, council members, city staff, and the OIR team. My name is Romick Hakopian, Chairman of the Burbank Police Commission, and I'm joined by my fellow commissioners, Vice Chair Michael Elman, Secretary Ann Wenzel, Commissioner James Coombs, Paul McKenna, Michael Chapman, and Narbe Hortunian. The mission of the Police Commission on behalf of the community of Burbank and the direction of the City Council is to provide civilian oversight and advocate for fair, effective law enforcement policies that serve the greater good. We monitor the Burbank Police Department to help maintain a culture of respect, professionalism, and transparency. At its core, the Commission serves as a bridge to strengthen trust between residents, the police department, and city leadership. Our goal is simple: to ensure the community voices are heard, concerns are addressed with understanding, and public safety remains a shared value. And our commitment is to operate as a cohesive team that values collaboration, respect, and a unified mission. Each member brings unique insight, and together we approach our work with professionalism and care. Our role is to bring clarity, to help residents see what the department actually does, why certain policies exist, and why certain procedures exist, which is the essential role of a police department. During our monthly meetings, the police department provides reports on current initiatives, policy, challenges, and community programs. These updates create a valuable opportunity to share information, educate the public, and strengthen trust between the department and the community. Over the past year, our work is focused on 4 key areas: traffic and mobility safety, mental and behavioral health, public safety and crime prevention, and community engagement. For traffic and mobility safety, we examined e-bike and scooter regulations and reviewed parking enforcement data to improve accountability. For mental and behavioral health, we supported domestic violence outreach, observed the continued growth of the mental health evaluation team, and promoted compassionate, service-based approaches to homelessness. For public safety and crime prevention, we analyzed the Racial and Identity Profiling Act, also known as the RIPA report, and narcotics data, reviewed the AB 481 military equipment policy, and explored ways to strengthen transparency and fairness in policing. And finally, community engagement. We focused on fostering genuine connections between the department and the people it serves. Our commissioners participated in Police and Fire Day, a National Night Out, the Drive Right Save Lives campaign, the NACO conferences, DEA drug take-back events, and cookies, ice cream, and coffee with the cop. We also supported pedestrian and school safety initiatives with the Burbank Unified School District. We also deepened collaboration with police leadership through briefings, site visits, ride-alongs, and joint initiatives, ensuring our work reflects the needs of the community and the realities of law enforcement. Our partnership with Chief Quintero, the department, and our council liaisons, Councilmember Rosati and Councilmember Mullins, is built on a foundation of mutual respect, open communication, and a shared commitment to serving the community with integrity and care. Thank you again for your trust and support. We're honored to serve the city and happy to answer any questions about the work of the Police Commission or the OIR report. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Thank you for all you do on the commission and for serving our community. All right. So next, council have an opportunity to ask questions, make comments. Does anyone have any questions for either the IOC or the commission? Yes, Councilmember Anthony.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Thank you for that presentation. Just building on the metaphor, you know, if you go to the dentist regularly, it prevents those big procedures. You do the small cleanings, and you don't have to get the teeth removed. I was in attendance 2 years ago when you gave your final report to the Pasadena City Council on the use of force death of Anthony McLean. Then, as you are now, as I have always seen you, your report was thorough. It was fully investigative, and all of the recommendations, the things that you see departments do, it is very clear in your definitions of what has happened and what could be done better. I think for us, we've gotten to a point now where you all are hunting for things to fix, to justify the paycheck, which I appreciate. Because like I said, if you go in and just do those detailed cleanings, you keep it healthy. You provided 16 recommendations. Have you given that presentation to the commission separately already, or this is tonight? This is the first time you're seeing them? Okay. Then I'm going to ask the commission. You've had a chance to look at the 16. I know our department, we're comfortable with all 16, yes? I mean, it seems like it's pretty clear. If there's any issues or anything that you'd want to go over, any of the items, that's what tonight is for. But I think just on its surface, it looks like we're all in agreement. So I think these 16 recommendations are excellent.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Anthony. Yes, Councilmember Mullins?
Thank you. So I'm so pleased, of course, to see you year after year come here and report on the activities in the police department, the transparency that our department provide. I recall my first presentation that you made in 2012 as the city clerk, and my mouth dropped open. I was in awe of exactly all the reporting that you have brought back to the city. And today I am more pleased to, we're not perfect, but we definitely have improved tremendously. And this is thanks to our men and women in the police department, the leadership in the department. So I do appreciate listening and reading what was in the report for this week. With that, being the liaison for the police commission, I know there's always a bit of a struggle to what is my role? What can I do to help? I want to help to be effective between the community and also the police department. And so I wanted to find out of the 16 points that you brought back to our attention, what can we do to engage perhaps our commissioners with the police department on this? The theme seemed to be community involvement and community engagement. What can we do, or is this something maybe perhaps we can talk about in the future at their meetings of certain points that they can do to help assist a police department to get the word out, to have community engagement within the boundaries of our police department policies, because we definitely want to make sure our staff is involved in providing the direction to exactly what we need to do. And this is something I don't know if the chief can answer now, or you perhaps can answer for me, and also for the commission, because that seemed to be always asking, what else can we do? What can we do for the police department?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember Mullins. I'll take an initial stab on it. Perhaps the chief may want to supplement my remarks. We've had a chance to sort of, from our perch, see the progress of the commission over the years. And I have to say that during those torturous few years, the commission, while it was continuing to exist, there wasn't a robust way in which they were given work to do or assignments. And so if I recall correctly, one year they spent pretty much every meeting on looking at the department's strategic plan. you can only look at the strategic plan so many times, right? So as the chair indicated, with regard to the progress report of the past year, what they are doing now is much more robust, much more varied, and I think much more influential and important. So not only are they getting up to speed with regard to police practices through their encounters and engagement, but they're also providing a community voice with regard to their impressions on the protocols, practices, and events that they are being advised upon. If you look more closely at our report, one of our recommendations actually suggests that the commission take a look. As my colleague Teresa indicated, one of the things that I think the department is currently going to review again is the current pursuit policy. And as Teresa indicated, we think that whenever there's a shift in a policy, that to the degree that you can get stakeholders involved in those discussions, the products end up being better, and you get to hear from the community voices about what that policy ought to look like, what are the prerogatives. Is apprehension so important that we're going to risk liability or hurting innocent people in police pursuits, for example? And to hear from the community might be helpful, which is why we expressly indicated the commission may want to take that on at one of their meetings and say, what is that risk reward? Where do we come down on it? And they may come down on it differently individually, but as a body, then they might be able to express their views as a body on how that should come out. So I think the short answer is I think they're on a more structured path than they were a decade ago, but there may be more that can be done, and so I appreciate the question. And I also do think that it's really important to have the council liaison. That is critical, so that they feel connected to the city in some way.
We are on speed dial, so they know they can get a hold of us at any time and with questions and guidance. And of course, we work directly with the chief. And I am very pleased to hear you. Actually, in the recommendation, that pursuit is going to be something we can take a look at and have a discussion about, because there tend to be confusion in the community about, and I heard both. I heard, oh, they don't do a pursuit anymore, which for a while, as you indicated, yes, we didn't do it. And now, people are like wondering, when do they do it? Why aren't they doing it enough? And so I think it's this specific concern. I'm glad that it was in the report, because I often hear it from individuals in the community, and having that dialogue at the commission meeting where freely can be discussed and maybe open to questions from some of the commissioners and the public to when we do it, when we not do it. It gives an opportunity for education to our community, and we'll see what can come out from that education. But I do appreciate that you did bring that up as part of the area that we need to take a look at. As usual, we're very supportive of the commission and their work. I know they try really hard to represent our police department and the staff as the best they can. Sometimes the public is not as engaged in those meetings as they should, but we can do a better job promoting the meetings, and hopefully they show up for that.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you for your report.
And speaking of timely, if you look at the LA Times today, A1, there's an article on the payouts that LAPD is paying on bad driving by officers. So
okay.
It's a timely topic.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rosati?
Thank you, Vice Mayor. I just don't have any questions, just some comments. I appreciate your report and the work that you do. I think, having that feedback is important. There's always room for improvement. I know that our department feels that way. They're always striving for the next level. So I think it's all important to have that review every year. It's a tough job. It's a fast-moving job, being a police officer in law enforcement. It's never the same. So I can appreciate the detail in the report. And for our commission, you guys do a great job. You're very engaged. I see you at many events. I wrote down some notes that maybe going forward, as things change, Maybe we can look into recruitment and hiring. It's important to have good people always, and as people cycle through their career, we're constantly having to backfill with new talent. I think investment in technology to be more effective to protect not only our officers in the department, but also the public. I think with the license plate readers and all the technology that's coming forth that we use, that we take granted and that we're able to catch bad guys, it's important to stay on technology. And you had mentioned education and training, just this constant, training, education, whether it's new methods and opportunities out there that we can expose our officers to, I think it's important. Work on identifying, upgrading our aging facilities. We're constantly looking at vehicles and enhancements in that, and how our officers are housed and in their daily job, where their offices are, and just looking at the facilities. And then, in our town, it's traffic safety. It seems like the last 5 years has just been crazy. I mean, just this week alone, I can't tell you, 3 people had made U-turns right in front of me as I'm going down the street, just right in front of me. And so I think traffic safety, education, especially around our schools, I think we need to get the word out, across the city. So, but I appreciate the report, and I appreciate you folks at the commission and chair, the work that you guys do. I enjoy being the liaison, and like the council member said, you have my cell phone number. I'll try to be available as much as possible. If you give me notice, I will be available. So, but thank you.
Thank you, council member. So excellent report. Thank you for your thoroughness and consistency year after year of providing this report for us. As Councilmember said, a lot of work goes into this report, and you provide us a lot of great insights into our department. I also want to thank the department for being willing to have this report every year and being open to it, and every year taking the recommendations and improving our department each time. And that's a brave thing to do. It's a brave thing to face what's going on, and you do that every year voluntarily. So just much appreciation for that. It seems to me that this is the third one I've seen, and each year when you do the report, it sounds to me like it's an A report that recommends ways to become an A+ report. And I feel like that's again what's happened this year, and that's a testament to our department of continually to improve, and also to the quality of recommendations that you give us for improvement. I do have one question about a few of the recommendations that are kind of together. The last 3 recommendations, 14, 15, and 16, all have to do with officer support, mental health support, stress support, those types of things. Either you or the chief, do you have any further insight on ways that we could improve the support for our officers moving forward, or ways to address this?
Why don't you do that first? Yeah. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you for the question, Vice Mayor. So the recommendations 14, 15, and 16, I absolutely agree with. This profession, this job is difficult. And the stress that the men and women of the organization take on every day compounds over the years, as we all know. I mean, you have personal pressures, professional pressures, environmental pressures. And so how do we keep them in the seat, sharp, focused, aware, prepared, and ready to be our best selves within the community? And a lot of that, as far as what we do, is through very robust type programs in the mental health and kind of wellness space. There are already certain things that we are doing, have been doing, and will be doing. So one we brought on, and I think it was highlighted within the report, is a wellness coordinator. that we will have within our facility, on a part-time basis, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, as far as developing some type of not only wellness, but also fitness type of program. Because the reality, the demands of the job and what it requires, that includes nutrition, that also includes mental health, that includes fitness. On the horizon, something that my police administrator, command staff have been working on is developing a more robust type mental health program. I think I've mentioned it to you specifically. We have gone out and looked at other programs and also looked at what other agencies within the region are doing, and that is a more comprehensive type program that will provide services to everybody within the organization, not only sworn, but also our professional staff, and extend out to their families. So we're intending to bring that on, being fiscally responsible as much as possible, within at least I'm hoping, as early as 2026.
Wow.
And then other things that we can do internally as far as moving the culture in the right direction is just showing just how much we care about the men and women of the organization, being empathetic and compassionate in the challenges that they're dealing. It's easy for me on the third floor and command staff to meet in a room, have big picture discussions, conversations about policy and, certain requirements. So we are balancing risk versus benefit. But the reality is sometimes we forget on the impact to the men and women of the organization. And I think that's a very important piece in staying connected with them. And kind of we've already talked about it here as far as getting and seeking their input so we can tailor that policy accordingly so it has the least impact with the most, at least, gain in what we're trying to achieve.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for elaborating on that. I wanted to highlight that because that is such an important part of supporting our police department and the folks that we depend on in our community to provide such high-level service. That's a lot to ask of them without giving that support. So I'm glad to hear that we are increasing our support for that. Thank you for that elaboration. Overall, very happy with the report. Continue with the great work. And a brief comment to the commission. I too notice how much you're engaged in the community. I really appreciate how willing you are to pursue these initiatives, to reach out to the community, to connect, to think of different ways to support the police department. And I also appreciate the thoroughness in which you also conduct the way you look at each issue very, very thoroughly. So, and also an honest, fair way. So it's not hypercritical, but it's also not too easy on them either. So it's a nice balance. And this topic we just spoke about would be wonderful if you're able to explore that this year to see how you can also partner with the department to look at that. And I also agree with the pursuit policy as a thing to look at as the commission. And also what was mentioned earlier was defensive force training. You mentioned that. I think that's a really interesting area to look at as well. It's one thing to know how to do it in the training room at the moment, and if you haven't practiced in a while, then seeing it on the field, it's tough to pull up. It's like a fire drill, right? You have to keep doing it in order to remember have that fast muscle memory to remember how to do it on the fly. So those are things I think might be beneficial for the commission to look at. But overall, great report, and thank you so much. All right, any further questions? Yes, Councilmember Anthony.
Yeah, I just have a favor to ask, and I want to see if you're able to do it without too much hassle. You've been coming here 13 years. I've seen the last 9 of your reports. And if memory serves, I think this is the first time that every single recommendation was taken on. And not that we've skipped a bunch, but if it's possible, would you be able to put together a packet of all the previous non-accepted recommendations? And I ask that because we have new leadership in our department. We have a few new members on our police commission. We have new members on council. If you could put that together, send it to the council and the chief and to us, we'd love to look at that. I can ask for it later if that's...
This is what I would recommend if I could. So now that we have a new police chief, is perhaps maybe the police chief could look back at the last couple of years of recommendations and just review that if he hasn't already. Mm-hmm. I would rather not spend time and money
Okay.
on OIR for doing that. So.
Sure. Fair enough.
I would say more to the point, their current contract expires before the next review cycle. So we'll have to put something in the budget before they
Okay.
can do anything.
Fair enough. All right, we'll put a pin in that for now. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments, council? All right. Well, thank you again for the report, for the commission for being here tonight, and all you do. All right, now we will, let's see, what time are we at? 5:30, so you have a short recess until 6 o'clock, so 20 minutes. We'll see you back here in 20 minutes. I don't have a gavel. There we go. There we go.